Welcome, my name's Hydo, and this is the Pantheon. Today we're going to be having a look at one of the brand new Commander 2021 commanders, which is quite a fiery little lady. So let's have a look at Rionya, Fire Dancer. Weighing in at 5 mana, which is a lot, but because of the way this card works, we're going to be running quite a few rituals and things to power out bigger spells, so 5 isn't that hard to get to. She says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, create X tokens that are copies of another target creature you control, where X is 1 plus the number of instant and sorcery spells you've cast this turn. They gain haste, exile them at the beginning of the next end step. And she's a 3/4. So this commander wants us to play a nice mix of instant sorceries and also creatures that we want to copy. The fact that she always gives you at least one, despite the fact you might not be casting instant and sorceries, is really quite good. So without further ado, let's have a look at a couple of cards that work well with her. In at number 5, we've got Dockside Extortionist. A 2 mana 1/2. When it enters the battlefield, create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of artifacts and enchantments your opponents control. Excellent bit of ramp, very expensive card unfortunately, but this is exactly the sort of card you want to be copying with our commander. A lot of the time your opponents will have a ton of artifacts and enchantments on the field, and using this you just ramp yourself ridiculously. The turn you play your commander, if this is on the field, she's going to create a token of it, and then you're probably going to have the mana back, like 5 odd tokens from your commander. But to go along with Dockside Extortionist, we've got Priest of Urbrask. So 3 mana 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, add red to your mana pool. Now, with this, it basically rebuys itself. It is in the middle of combat, so if you have a bunch of instant speed things that you can cast, creating a bunch of tokens of this will create a bunch of mana that you can cast those instants with. But with Cloudstone Curio, which is a 3 mana artifact that reads, whenever a non-artifact permanent comes into play under your control, you may return another permanent you control that shares a permanent type with it to its owner's hand. With Priest of Urbrask and our Dockside Extortionist, we can flick between these two because Priest of Urbrask makes 3 mana, bounces back Dockside Extortionist. Use those 3 mana, you pay 2, cast the Dockside Extortionist, that makes a bunch of tokens. This can lead to infinite mana, which is pretty cool, really. And then, obviously, if you've got a big X spell, or you can just play out the rest of your hand. Runaway Steamkin is a 2 mana elemental. Whenever you cast a red spell, if Runaway Steamkin has fewer than 3 1/1 counters on it, put a 1/1 counter on it. Remove 3 1/1 counters from Runaway Steamkin, add 3 red. So this is another enabler that allows us to create a bunch of mana. Really quite cool. Then, to go along these, to spoke a bit about rituals. These are nice instants that can really push our mana up, get us to like our big spells, and they add another token that our commander will create. Seething Song is a 3 mana instant, add 5 red to your mana pool. Simple. Desperate Ritual, 2 mana instant, add 3 red to your mana pool. Paratic Ritual, 2 mana instant, add 3 red to your mana pool. All very similar, all do exactly the same thing, but they work fantastically with this commander. Splice into Arcane, we're not going to be really doing that. Arcane spells, for the most part, are pretty garbage. Which brings us on to number 4. Haze of Rage. So, these sort of subsection of instant sorceries are ones that we can cast over and over again. 2 mana for a sorcery. Buyback 2, which means you can pay an additional 2 as you play the spell. If you do, put this card into your hand as it resolves. Creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. Storm. Excellent little card. You can use it over and over again, pump your team. If you cast it twice, that's +3/+0 until to all your team. And you've increased your storm count by 2. Really, really cool. And the artwork is fantastic. To go along with this, we want a couple of very cheap instant sorcery. Shattering Pulse is a 2 mana instant with buyback of 3. Destroy a target artifact. Excellent spell. Red is great at destroying artifacts, so this works very well against the majority of decks. Crash Through and Expedite are both 1 mana sorceries, and instants, that draw you a card. You want to be filtering through your deck, and these cards are just a staple in this sort of deck. They increase your storm count, so you get an extra token, and they have a small effect, and they draw you a card. Crash Through, creatures you control gain trample until end of turn. Okay. Expedite, target creature gains haste until end of turn. Can be really good if we've got a massive dude that we want to swing in with and make a bunch of tokens of. Then we want to get these spells back. Past in Flames, 4 mana sorcery. Each instant sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. Then it self has flashback for 5 mana. This can lead us to, casting a bunch of these spells and then casting a bunch more, making an absolute boatload of tokens. Underworld Breach, very similar card. 2 mana enchantment. Each non-land card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to its mana cost, plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard, allowing you to cast all of your spells from your graveyard. And you have to sacrifice Underworld Breach at the beginning of the next end step. Then, really cool card that we could be copying with our commander, Anarchist. 5 mana for a 2/2, very, very weak. But when it enters the battlefield, you may return target sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Really good. Can buy back a bunch of spells if we get a bunch of tokens of this guy. Which brings me on to number 3. Perforos, God of the Forge. We're going to be making an absolute ton of tokens, so this guy is incredible and will kill the table. 4 mana for a legendary enchantment creature god, who's a 6/5. Indestructible. As long as your devotion to red is less than 5, Perforos isn't a creature. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Perforos deals 2 damage to each opponent. That's the bit that we're really interested in here. Then you can be a 3 mana, creature you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. So with the cards earlier, if we make a bunch of mana, we can use this, absolutely make our team ridiculously large. Impact Tremors is a card very similar to Perforos. 2 mana enchantment, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Then, what are we going to be copying? We want a bunch of token makers. We want to churn out a bunch of tokens with our token making token commander token. Siegegang Commander is a 5 mana 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, create 3 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. Pay 2, sacrifice a goblin. It deals 2 damage to any target. This is excellent, so if our commander's making 4 copies of this, we get 4 times 3 goblins, so we get 12 goblins as well. Really cool. Massive board state. Perforos is going to deal. So that's 16, so 32 damage. Yeah, quick maths. Beetlebat Chief, 4 mana 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. Exactly the same sort of thought process. Makes a bunch of goblins. We're going to kill our opponents. Mere Battlesphere, one of the best versions of this. 7 mana for a 4/7. When it enters the battlefield, create 4 1/1 colorless Mere artifact tokens. So absolutely bunch of Meres flying everywhere. Then when it attacks, you may tap X untap Meres you control. If you do, Mere Battlesphere gets +X/+0 until end of turn. It deals X damage to target player or planeswalker it's attacking. Really powerful. With all the Meres we're going to be making, that ability itself could actually kill someone. Then we've got Pir and Kira Nidalar. 4 mana for a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 color stop to artifact creature tokens. This is a legendary creature, so it's a bit weak making the token copies of this, because all of the legendary tokens obviously die. I mean, they're all going to get exiled at the end of the turn, but you can't attack with them. But really cool that you could use this card. Chancellor of the Forge is a 7 mana 5/5. You may reveal this card from your opening hand. If you do, you get a 1/1 goblin. Cool. When it enters the battlefield, add X 1/1 red goblin creature tokens to the battlefield, where X is the number of creatures you control. So if we've got a massive board, this just doubles the size of it. And if we're making a ton of tokens of it, it's just going to get exponentially bigger and bigger and bigger. Which brings me on to number 2. Brgi. God of Storytelling. 3 mana for a god. 3/3. Whenever you cast a spell, add red. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. The boast ability there means nothing. I would not play any of the boast creatures. They're pretty garbage. But this is, again, a really good way. We're going to be trying to churn through the deck, and making mana off all of our cheap little spells is brilliant. So, but Brgi goes along with Grinning Ignis, which is a 3 mana 2/2. Pay a red, return Grinning Ignis to its owner's hand, add 3 mana to your mana pool. Activate this ability only to any time you can cast a sorcery. So, for 1 red, you get 3 red back. So, with Brgi on the field, every time, there we go, some more lights there. Every time we cast the Grinning Ignis, we get another mana. So we got 4 mana, and the casting cost and the activated ability of Grinning Ignis costs 4 mana. So, we can just cast Grinning Ignis over and over again, which is infinite into the battlefields for things like Perforos, but it's also infinite Storm. So a card like Grape Shot, 2 mana for a sorcery. It deals 1 damage to target creature or player with Storm, so you copy it for every spell you've cast before this turn. So with Grape Shot, you know, you're grinning in this, blah, 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 and then Grape Shot everyone to death. Pretty cool. Aetherflux Reservoir, very similar to this. 4 mana. Whenever you cast a spell, you gain 1 life for each spell you've cast this turn. Pay 50 life. It deals 50 damage to target creature or player. So if we're just casting Grinning Ignis over and over, we can kill our opponents with Aetherflux Reservoir, as we're going to be gaining a ton of life, and then we can just shoot everyone to death. Brings me on to my number 1 pick for this commander. So, Storm, you know, it showed up a couple of times here, and Dragon Storm is such a cool card, and it works really well with our commander. So, using all of the rituals and things that we've gone, we get up to 9 mana, search our library for a dragon permanent card, and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library with Storm. So, if we've cast 4 spells before it, we get to do this 5 times. So, we get to search for 5 dragons. What dragons are we going to get? Terror of the Peaks is a 5 mana 5/4 with flying. Spells your opponents cast that target Terror of Peaks cost an additional 3 life to cast. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror of the Peaks deals damage equal to its power to any target. Now, if we have this and, you know, we bring a bunch of dragons in, they all see each other. Terror of the Peaks deals a ton of damage. But then with our commander, if this makes a bunch of tokens of it, say 5 tokens, each of the Terror of the Peaks will see all of the other Terror of the Peaks enter, and we'll just machine gun down our opponents. Works very similar with Scourge of Valkus, which is a 5 mana 4/4 with flying. When Scourge of Valkus or another dragon enters the battlefield under your control, it deals X damage to target creature or player, where X is the number of dragons you control. So again, we make a ton of tokens of this dragon. We're going to kill absolutely everyone. Finally, Spawn of Thrinax is one of the weaker versions of this sort of effect. 7 mana for a dragon with flying. When it enters the battlefield, it deals damage to target creature or player equals the number of mountains you control. It's a 5/5. So, again, we can shoot our opponents for a ton of damage. And that is my top 5 cards for this commander. Really cool, you know, it takes mono red in a slightly different direction. You know, it's Perforos is probably a stronger commander, but this is a really cool take on that idea, you know, making tokens, making our opponents pay for that. So, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've got any suggestions, please do let me know. I'd love to hear them. And subscribe. I'd appreciate it.